All right, so we're diving into the world of Jane Austen. I'm guessing you already know the basics, but we're going deeper than like those typical period dramas, you know? If we really want to unpack why Austen's work is still like so relevant centuries after she was writing. We've got biographies, articles, even some of her letters. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think what's really fascinating is Austen wasn't just writing romance novels. She was really like commenting on society as a whole, and doing it in a way that was both witty and subversive for the time. To really understand her work, you kind of have to understand the world she lived in. So think about England in the late 1700s and early 1800s. The Industrial Revolution's transforming everything. Napoleonic Wars are raging. But women, their options were incredibly limited.
Yeah, it wasn't just about finding a charming gentleman. Marriage back then was practically an economic necessity, right?
Exactly. It wasn't just about love. It was often the only way for women to be financially secure. And all this pressure from society, all these expectations, that's at the heart of so many of Austen's novels. She was writing about real-life dilemmas, and I think that's part of why her work still resonates with us today.
Totally. It's like she's dropping truth bombs, but like in elegant prose.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Jane herself. Born in 1775. One of 8 children, wow.
Yeah, a big family. And they loved stories, the whole family. Her dad was a clergyman, but they weren't wealthy. And her relationship with her sister, Cassandra, that was really special. Their letters give us these really precious insights into Jane's thoughts, her life.
It's almost like reading her diary. Sadly, a lot of the letters were destroyed. So there's still a lot of mystery around her. But even with that, you can see how vibrant she was. Someone who loved reading, writing, and observing society, like you said, with a sharp eye.
Definitely. And her love of reading really shaped her as a writer. I mean, back then, formal education for girls was limited. But Jane, she was a voracious reader. Authors like Samuel Richardson, Fanny Burney, you can actually see their influence in her writing.
So like any artist today, really a product of her influences. But she took it and created something unique. And you started young, writing plays, stories as a teenager, basically like fan fiction of her time, I guess you could say. And by her early 20s, she'd already drafted early versions of Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. Amazing.
Incredible. And those early drafts, they already show her wit, her social commentary. It wasn't just talent, it was dedication and a deep understanding of human nature.
So was she a revolutionary? Was she consciously trying to like challenge things, or was she just reflecting the reality of her world?
It's a complex question. I think the answer is somewhere in between, Austen was definitely aware of the limitations placed on women, and she explored those themes in her novels. But she did it with a subtlety, a wit, that allowed her to critique the system without being overtly rebellious, if that makes sense.
Like she was planting seeds of doubt, making people question things without hitting them over the head with it.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes her work so brilliant. She invites us to think for ourselves, to question what we see around us, and to recognize how complex human relationships are and societal structures.
So even though she was writing within the confines of her time, her work still feels modern in a way, and that's why we're still talking about it, right? But let's get into those novels. There's so much more to them than just romance.
Absolutely. Yes, there's love, witty banter, but it's all in service of something bigger. Austen was tackling issues of class, gender roles, the pressure on women, and these are all themes that are still so relevant today.
Totally. Like in Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth Bennet is a total firecracker. She's so independent, and she challenges all these societal expectations. She's not just looking for a rich husband. She wants intellectual equality, a real connection.
Right, and that was radical for the time. Austen's heroines are often witty, intelligent, and they're fiercely independent in their own ways. They challenge these traditional roles that are put on women, even if they're doing it within the boundaries of what's socially acceptable.
It's fascinating how she balances that line between conformity and rebellion. Her characters are in a world where social rules are everything. Yet they find ways to express themselves and make their own choices.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes them so relatable, even today. We may not have the same strict social codes, but we still face pressure, expectations. We're all trying to find our own voice, our agency within those constraints.
So we may not be living in Regency England, but we can still see ourselves in Austen's characters. We get their dilemmas, their desires, their struggles to find happiness.
That's why her work endures. It speaks to the human condition. That timeless search for love, connection, a place in the world.
Let's talk about her success as a writer. It wasn't an easy path, especially for a woman back then. She published anonymously at first. Her work was attributed to a lady. Can you imagine? Pouring your heart into a novel and releasing it without your name on it.
Wow, yeah. It really shows how talented she was, that her work could shine through, even without her name on it. Her first novel, Sense and Sensibility, that came out in 1811. And it paved the way for all these masterpieces.
And they're also different, but each one is just so brilliant. You've got Sense and Sensibility with all that emotion, Pride and Prejudice, the ultimate enemies to lovers story. She captures relationships with such depth and wit.
And even in her lighter works, like Emma, which is this delightful comedy of manners, Austen never loses sight of the social commentary. She uses humor to expose the follies, the hypocrisies of her time, making us laugh, but also making us think.
Yeah, that's what makes her work so enduring, that blend of wit and insight. But her life wasn't just literary triumphs. She had her own challenges too, right?
Absolutely. Even with her success, Jane had money worries. She never married, although there might have been a romance or two. And sadly, her health declined in her late 30s.
It's a good reminder that behind this brilliant mind, this legacy, there was a real woman with her own joys and sorrows. And she died so young, only 41.
In 1817, yeah. It's a loss that's still felt by readers.
It really is. And her work has never gone out of print. Think about that. Over 2 centuries later, we're still reading and talking about Jane Austen.
It's amazing. And not just reading, we're adapting her stories for the screen, the stage. We're reimagining them in modern settings like Clueless and Bridget Jones's Diary.
Yeah, it's amazing how her stories connect with us in all these different ways.
It shows how universal her themes are and the enduring power of her characters. But beyond just the entertainment, Austen's work gives us this valuable perspective on the social dynamics, the expectations of her time. It's like looking into the past and seeing how much has changed and how much is still the same.
So with this deep dive, we're not just exploring the life and work of a brilliant writer. We're exploring storytelling itself,
Yeah.
the complexity of human relationships, and how the past shapes the present.
Exactly. It's more than just historical facts. We're unearthing these timeless truths that still speak to us today. That's what makes this deep dive so exciting. You know, it's remarkable how these novels, they seem so contained, like those drawing rooms and country estates, but they speak to something much bigger.
Yeah, it's like she figured out human nature or something. The way she writes about these like everyday interactions, these subtle power shifts, all the unspoken desires, it's all so relatable.
It really is, and she does it so delicately, like Sense and Sensibility. On the surface, it's 2 sisters, love and loss, right? But underneath, it's this exploration of personality, sense versus sensibility, and how those differences shape our choices.
Yeah.
And ultimately, who we become.
Like those 2 sisters, Eleanor and Marianne. They're like different approaches to life almost. Eleanor's practical, restrained, and Marianne's all passion and impulse. It's like she's asking us, which one are you, Anne?
Right, and the book doesn't give easy answers. Both Sense and Sensibility have good and bad sides. It's about finding that balance, using your head and your heart.
That's a theme that runs through all her work, I think. Balancing what society expects and what we want as individuals. And Pride and Prejudice, I mean, come on. It's the story of defying those first impressions, those pressures, to find real love.
And it's so much more than just a romance, too. Think about all the social commentary in there, the obsession with money and status, women having to marry well, those ridiculous courtship rituals.
Like she's holding up a mirror to society, saying, look at yourselves.
Yeah.
It's still relevant today, isn't it? We might not be wearing those fancy clothes and going to balls, but we're dealing with the same pressures.
Oh, absolutely. That pressure to fit in, to be successful, it's all there in Austen, just in different clothes.
Now, Mansfield Park, that one's a bit trickier, right? Not as light and fun as some of the others.
Yeah, it makes you think about some uncomfortable things. Morality, responsibility, what true virtue really means. Fanny Price, the main character, a lot of people see her as just an observer, kind of passive. But I think she's got this inner strength, this moral compass that guides her.
That's what makes it so interesting, I think. It makes you question your own values. You can't just label the characters as good or bad. They're all flawed, they make mistakes, and you're left wondering about the choices they make.
That's pure Austen right there. She doesn't give you easy answers. She gives you these complex characters, difficult situations, and you have to think it through yourself.
Speaking of complex characters, we can't forget Emma Woodhouse. She's like a force of nature, so witty and independent, but she also loves matchmaking. Maybe a bit too much.
Oh, Emma, she's one of Austen's best. Flawed, definitely, but charming, well-meaning. And in the end, she learns and grows.
Emma is just fun to read. It's like all those social blunders and misunderstandings. But it's also about learning to see yourself honestly, recognizing your own blind spots, your limits.
And the importance of empathy, understanding other people. Emma has to step outside her own little world, see things from other people's perspectives. That's a lesson we could all use, even now.
Then you have Northanger Abbey.
Yeah.
That one's a little different, isn't it? Like she's playing with those Gothic novels that were popular.
It is. She's kind of making fun of the genre, but at the same time telling a really good story. All those Gothic elements, the castles, the mysterious heroes, she turns them upside down.
And shows how silly some of those ideas are, but also explores imagination and what happens when we let our fantasies go too far.
It reminds us that Austen wasn't just observant. She was a master storyteller. Humor, satire, romance. She blended it all seamlessly.
And finally, there's Persuasion. A lot of people say it's her most mature work, second chances, enduring love, but also this feeling of melancholy, regret.
Anne Elliot, the main character, she's so relatable, so quiet and thoughtful, often overlooked, but she's got this inner strength, this resilience that really shines through.
Persuasion is just beautiful. Lost love, time passing by, how complicated relationships can be. It sticks with you.
It shows how versatile Austen was as a writer. Comedies, social satire, love stories, she could do it all. No wonder people are still reading her.
It's clear her legacy goes beyond the books themselves. She's become this icon, Her characters, her stories, they're part of our culture. But what do you think it is about her work? Why does this still resonate with us today?
Well, for one, her stories are just plain fun. That wit, the romance, the drama, it's all so engaging.
Like a period drama, but so much deeper. You're drawn into these characters' lives.
And that's where Austen shines. She understood relationships, those power dynamics, the things we don't say but feel.
Like she was the psychologist way before psychology.
Exactly. She got how people work, how our past shapes us, how our hopes and fears affect our choices.
And she wrote about it with such wit, such elegance. It seems simple, but there's so much meaning there. You can read her books over and over and find something new.
Like peeling back layers, there's always something more to discover, some truth about ourselves that Austen's revealing.
And it's amazing how, even though it's all set in this very specific time, Regency England with all those rules, the themes are universal.
They really are. Love, loss, ambition, wanting to belong. These are timeless.
Yeah, we might not be wearing those clothes or going to those parties.
Yeah.
But we still face the same challenges.
Absolutely. Wanting to be loved, wanting success, figuring out how to live in this crazy world. And Austen's novels, they're like a guide.
They show us what not to do, the importance of knowing yourself, understanding others, that kindness and compassion matter.
And she doesn't preach, she just tells the story, lets it unfold, and we get to make our own decisions.
It's amazing that people are still debating her work, arguing about the characters, the endings, what it all means today.
That's what makes her legacy so powerful. She's not just some old writer on a shelf. She's part of our culture. Her stories are still alive, inspiring us, making us think.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this. Which Austen character do you connect with most, and why?
Is it Elizabeth, with her independence and wit? Fanny, with her quiet strength and morals? Maybe Emma, who's learning and growing?
Think about the characters, the themes that really resonated with you. You might surprise yourself with what you discover.
Because that's the magic of Jane Austen. She takes us to another time. But she also helps us understand ourselves better. The human heart, it's a timeless thing.
It's wild to think Jane Austen writing over 200 years ago, and we're still so into her. What is it about her work that still grabs us today?
Well, part of it is just how entertaining the stories are. The witty dialogue, the romance, all that drama in those fancy houses, it's just captivating.
Like better than any period drama, right?
Yeah.
You're not just watching, you're really in those characters' heads.
And that's where Austen's brilliance is. She just nailed those complex relationships, the little power shifts, those desires people have but don't talk about.
She was like a psychologist before that even existed.
Well, exactly. She understood people, how our past affects us, and how our hopes and fears, they change what we do.
All with this wit and elegant writing. You think it's simple, but it's so layered.
You can reread her books and still find new things.
Like peeling back an onion. Always some deeper truth about humans that Austen's pointing out.
And it's amazing those novels are set in a specific time and place, that Regency England with all the rules and social stuff, but the themes, they're universal.
Yeah, love, loss, ambition, that pressure to fit in, finding your place. Timeless stuff.
Absolutely. We might not be wearing those clothes or going to those parties, but we still deal with those same things.
Wanting to be loved, wanting to succeed, trying to figure out life.
Austen's like giving us a map for all that.
She shows us where people mess up, how important it is to know yourself, be empathetic, kindness matters,
And she doesn't tell you what to think. She lets the story play out. You decide what it means.
It blows my mind that people are still arguing about her books today. The characters, the endings, what it all means for us now.
That's the sign of a true legacy, I think. She's not just some writer in the past. She's still with us. Her stories are alive, making us think.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Jane Austen, I want to leave you with this. Which character do you connect with most?
And why? Is it Elizabeth, with her independence? Or Fanny, who's so strong in her own quiet way? Maybe it's Emma, who makes mistakes but learns from them.
Think about who touched you in these books, the themes that got to you.
You might surprise yourself with what you realize about yourself, you know?
Because that's the magic of Austen, I think. She takes us back in time, but she also helps us understand ourselves better.
That human heart, it hasn't changed that much.
So until next time, happy reading, everyone. And I hope you always find a little bit of yourself in Jane Austen's world.